tuned into SEC Sunday Night, part of the Chief Sports Network.
Hit the lights. It's Sunday night, and welcome to SEC Sunday Night Live on the Chief Sports Network, proudly presented by Hewitt Damaduras Law, HDLawSC.com. I am Rob Williams, and co-hosting this first half hour with me, of course, is the award-winning and esteemed, notable producer of the Message Board Genius podcast, here to tickle our ears with his sultry tones, if he can find the unmute button on his keyboard. Casey Cregan is here with us. What's going on, my friend?
That was really well done, Rob, because I was sitting here making noises, and then realized I was on mute. So,
well, there's no way, first of all, Casey, and we're late starting the show. I was on the Late Night Gamecock show. We obviously went a little extra over there. No big deal. Here we are. We're here for you. We're going to bring you the latest in the SEC. We've got Leeann Herring from the Rebel Walk with us tonight in the second half hour. She's going to talk about what's going on in Oxford. We know it's been pretty quiet over there all off season, so I'm interested to see what she has to say. Nothing happening. Things have been calm, and we'll get to it. Obviously, if you follow the SEC in any way, shape, or form, you know that they are. It has not been quiet over there, so I'm interested to jump into that conversation. But we're gambling tonight, Casey. We're gambling tonight because I am on the road. I'm in a mobile studio. I had I'm not afraid to share a Wi-Fi issue at Casa de Williams on this traveling trip. Luckily, a friend of ours down the street has a house with a covered porch on the front, and so I can't get in, but I can access the Wi-Fi. We are here. We are praying that my light does not go dead, because I will be in the dark by the end of this hour. If it does, I'll just be talking to Leeann, and you'll be able to hear me but not see me, and it will be completely pitch black. If you were with us last year when Jake Crane was on with Craig and I, that exact thing happened in this exact spot. My light died. I didn't have the porch light on, and I talked to them in the dark. So we have that going on, Casey. As the night goes on, it's going to get a little more rowdy down below me, as I am in a popular vacation spot in the state of South Carolina, and golf carts with music and people talking are going to make their way by. But right now, a thunderstorm and heavy rain might be in the background. Don't fall asleep on us if you can hear the rain on the roof. But we'll see if that can't deter the noise that's going on behind us. So a lot's happening, and we're having a great time, and we're here.
Yeah, we're not even talking about the SEC yet, and that much is happening already. It's crazy.
It is indeed. It is indeed, my friend. Talk to me about your week. How are things going? Last week we were obviously coming right out of the 4th of July, so everybody's a little bit slower. How are we doing getting back into the swing of things? What's summer looking like for you? Back from traveling, where everything is back in motion now?
Yeah, in motion, right? You can see the fan. The fan is back. The fan
is back. We love
it. The most popular portion of my segments is back. Yeah, we're back in the low country. I mean, you go from one area of the low country to another area of the low country, but excited because it's starting to get some rumblings. The World Cup is kind of dying down a little bit. We're down to 4 more teams. I say dying down as far as there's many games.
Right.
Baseball you can watch every night, but as far as like what's coming next, I feel like after the World Cup, talking season's going to be here, and if it's not already, and we're going to have college football on the horizon, pal.
It really is right around the corner, and it's exciting for us because we have SEC Media Days coming up. I'm going to ask you about that in just a minute, but we don't have games, we don't have guys on the field just yet, Casey. But we are about to hit the climax, if you will, of talking season, and then we'll be on the downward slide into actual ball with, and I always say this with quotes, air quotes, with fall camp, which is not fall at all in the South when August 1st rolls around and they hit the field. But we're looking forward to those first couple of weeks of August when these teams get going. We have something to talk about. It's going to be interesting. We've got our It just means more genius segment coming up as well. I will say shout out to Craig, who had a very important donor dinner tonight. So we're all going to be rich when he's done with that. And he could not be with us tonight. He did tee us up to argue. I'm not sure if you read the boards that he sent in, but there was definitely some devious treachery in that selection process. So thank you, Craig, for teeing us up, Casey and I, to really go back and forth. I'm going to leave a little
what happened?
time for that. There's just a couple of teams that he zeroed in on that we have some history with. So we'll get to that in a minute. But the first thing that I did want to ask you about SEC media days. Let me read these days. Obviously 4 days, so 4 sets of coaches. I'm going to read them off to you. If you have a sheet of paper, your phone, you want to type some stuff in here, you want to get it going, whatever you got, I'm going to give you. I want you to tell me, I want you to rank the days best to worst right off the rip here. Okay. Monday, in this order, Will Sign at Kentucky, Eli Drinkwitz at Missouri, Brent Venables at Oklahoma, and Josh Heupel from Tennessee. It's day 1. Day 2, Tuesday, is Alex Golish at Auburn, Kirby Smart from Georgia, Shane Beamer, South Carolina, and Clark Lee, Vanderbilt. Then Wednesday, Alabama's Kalen DeBoer, followed by John Summerall at Florida, Pete Golding at Ole Miss, and Mike Elko from Texas A&M. And then to close it down, it is Arkansas's Ryan Silverfield, Lane Kiffin from LSU, Mississippi State's Jeff Lebby, and Steve Sarkisian at Texas to shut it all down on Thursday, Casey. As you look at that, tell me what you're thinking.
Thursday.
Yeah, that's
Wednesday.
First.
I mean, anytime you put Lane Kiffin anywhere, you could have put Rob Williams, Casey, Craig, and Lane, and I still would have said that would have been the most exciting one.
It is.
But I also like that Sark is there too, because he's good for a quote or two too, and he may ruffle some feathers. So especially with that Texas Tech stuff that was going on earlier in the summer, he said stuff about Ole Miss out of context, taken out of context. And so I think that's a good way to end SEC Media Days. I know our friend Chris Marler will probably be on site there to ask some fun questions there.
There is
Go ahead.
No doubt about it. And I will be working behind the scenes to get our friend Chris Marler on here to give us an update of what's happening in SEC Media Days in a way that only he can. I'm going to ask him politely to hold back some of what he's giving out on social media and on his own site so that we can have a little bit of fire left in the tank. Chris, listen, reserve one joke for this airspace. That's all I'm asking.
Yeah,
just one. Doesn't have to be your headliner. It doesn't have to be your big one with the punch. We just need one joke. One joke.
Yeah, I like it. He's got plenty, so I'm sure he could do that. I do like I like Tuesday too with Golish and Kirby and Beamer, Clark Lee, maybe to a lesser extent, but I'm sure there's going to be questions about life after Diego Pavia for Clark Lee that maybe could get some fun answers from him. And then you got Wednesday with Alabama, DeBoer, new coach at Florida, obviously Pete Golding at Ole Miss, and Elko. There's going to be high hopes on A&M. So yeah, I think they did a nice job spreading out the news cycle here for those 4 days.
I think they did too.
They're going to wet your whistle Monday, right? They're going to wet your whistle a little bit.
And there's a lot, Casey. There's a lot of new coaches, obviously. They're able to kind of spread those out a little bit. And you definitely can't put Golding and Kiffin on the same day because you're going to want to make sure that you take advantage of that. And I do think it was strategic and well played to put Golding first because you're going to have something to say to Lane after Pete Golding. So I think that's just kind of how it shakes out. I like the way that breaks down. And now we have to do some boards because I'm afraid we only have a handful. And I'm going to go ahead and front end this. Spoiler, I'm going to speed through the quad that he sent that are all from the board that is loosely affiliated, strongly affiliated. I don't know, affiliated with me. I'm going to move relatively quickly through that one. Okay. We can talk about it. I'm just not putting them on blast for as long as maybe he would want me to. I'm not really sure what the thought process is there. I'm not sure if you can hear those great mud tires that just sped by and slung a puddle everywhere up here. But it's I think it's going to get rowdy here pretty soon, my friend. But without further ado, we'll start at a familiar place with our ears being tickled by the award-winning tones of one Casey Cregan at SEC Rant.
All right, MBG says the SEC is too tough for Kurt Signetti. Army Dog MD says Signetti couldn't win consistently in the SEC. The downside of this conference is by the end of the season, UGA's team is so broken they play less than optimally in the playoffs. I think Indiana is gifted an easy schedule with a few tests thrown in so they can grow, but their shtick wouldn't be the same if they were SEC.
Okay. Do we really think this is an accurate take about Signetti? I'm starting to think that it's not. Here's the thing that I did point out just an hour ago, Casey, on the air on the Late Night Gamecock show. 6 out of the 12 teams with the highest percentage chance to make the college football playoff are from the SEC. 3 are from the Big Ten. Out of the top 12, which obviously is significant because there are 12 spots, 6 from the SEC, 3 from the Big Ten. The top-heavy Big Ten, I do think, does not cannibalize itself nearly as much as this SEC schedule will. I do appreciate the point here that Georgia's team is broken by the end of the season, yada, yada. I don't necessarily think that's going to be the case, but there are teams out of those top 6 percentage odds getters from the SEC to get into the playoff that can be beaten up by the end of the season, if that makes sense. I do think that that's possible for that to happen, whereas Indiana gets an easy schedule, blah, blah, blah. It wasn't as easy last year. 2 years ago, I'll give it to you, they were a G5 roster that went through an easy schedule, and they still kind of held their own in the playoff a little bit. They didn't just get steamrolled. Last year, they were a buzzsaw. Nobody could touch them. Nobody could do anything with them. They beat Ohio State in that Big Ten championship game and kind of earned their spot at number 1 in the college football playoff. So I do think that Signetti has built a roster that can go up against the most talented teams in the country, because Ohio State, to be honest, is the most talented team in the country year in and year out if we're going to average it out. Now, when you look at the talent that Georgia has, the talent that Texas has, the talent that LSU has this year, now that we kind of have some new rosters on the board, I think talent-wise, you may have a little more balance, but at the end of the day, if you are an LSU or a Texas or a Georgia or an Ole Miss or whoever, you're going to have to make your way through these other teams that are that high. So I get this poster's point, but I do think it's over. This is a message board version of reality. I think that if you tame this point back a little bit, you can find some truth there, but you're probably a couple cold ones too deep to type this one up, or maybe that's just your general thought process because you're an SEC fan.
Yeah, I think if Indiana played Georgia last year, it would have been the same kind of result that the Alabama game was. There was no stopping Indiana last year.
Agreed.
And I give them 100% credit to the coaches. I do. So I don't know. I think Signetti could figure it out in the SEC.
Yeah, I think there's a learning curve in the SEC. Because it is a little. I think right now it is a little bit deeper, and there are less elite teams. I think things operate a little bit differently. Definitely, things will operate differently than they do in the Big Ten, just from a functionality standpoint, a conference standpoint, a leadership standpoint. So that you say he could figure it out. Yeah, I don't know. Like, does he figure it out year 1?
No, he didn't figure it out year 1 at Indiana.
Exactly. So I think that you come around to that, but no, I think that he's done a great job, and they are definitely a national power, which is one of the weirdest things that's ever come out of any of our mouths. All right. Speaking of Bama.
MBG says this Alabama fan is calling for a transition to electric vehicles ASAP to stop these Texas schools recruiting dominance. E for Bama says, from Bama Online, says the planet needs to transition to EVs as soon as possible to stop this nonsense. Was that in response to like the Lamborghinis that they're constantly showing recruits?
Yeah, I think so. This is funny. This one's just funny. I like this one a lot. The planet. We've gone beyond the SEC. We've gone beyond the world of college football. We've gone beyond the United States, the continent.
Mm-hmm.
We are at the planet needs to transition to EVs. as soon as possible to stop this nonsense.
Yeah, start at the top, let it trickle down, right? Shoot for the moon, shoot for the stars, and
I'm not sure that this poster sees it that way though, Casey. I'm not sure that they see it as a trickle down. I'm not sure that they see us
no,
shooting for the moon. I think that they are equating SEC recruiting with the top of the totem pole. So that's why they think they need to start up there. But
yeah,
your take maybe is a different one, that it does need to trickle down. I don't know.
It is a Bama fan too. We're not exactly talking with Rhodes Scholars. I'm not saying they're not smart, just not Rhodes Scholars.
Speaking of a lack of Rhodes Scholars, Casey's alma mater has found its way into the SEC show once again by way of the garnet and black for some kind of way. So I cut off MBG because we have all three here. So I'll say what he said. South Carolina lost a recruit to Clemson. All right, we're gonna go quick. We're gonna go quick.
Oh, Pepsi Cox says, have fun for a fifth place ACC team. D Hill 05 says half these kids will transfer when Dabo steps down after this year. Anon 630010 says, congrats, young man. You are now part of a cult university. And Pierre SC says, sounds like he's been brainwashed since being a kid. Honestly, shouldn't have even offered him.
This is Seth Tillman.
Punctuation.
Anybody wondering? No, I think that this is classic recruiting. This is old school recruiting. So we're going to take everything that we know about new school recruiting and we're going to set it to the side. And this became about stronger is longer and the best relationship for a defensive tackle that's in state. And the battle came down to South Carolina, Clemson, Georgia, Michigan, and it wasn't even really South Carolina in the top two. It really became a Georgia Clemson battle. So really the board, we should have pulled a Bulldog board. What Craig is doing is he's trying to distract us from the fact that this was actually, at the end of the day, Casey, a Clemson Georgia battle. Here's what I'll say. fourquarterfriday.com launched this week. I am one of the staff members there, one of the hosts of Four Quarter Friday. Every Friday morning at 9, myself and Matt Smith, aka Smitty, will be hosting that site. It is the 8th prep school site with the On3 and Rivals High School division nationally. So only the 8th state to have a Rivals site for high school sports across the state. fourquarterfriday.com. So for this reason, I am uber qualified for this take because I've talked to Seth Tillman multiple times about this commitment.
Bona fides. Here we go.
Leading into this, I have discussed this with him, the process. What does it look like? Where is he leaning? Who is he talking to? All the things, right? Mm-hmm. I just think it was about comfort. At the end of the day, that's going to be one case or another. I think that, obviously the rivalry between South Carolina and Clemson is hot. Always. And so you're gonna get barbs and jabs and salty takes in one direction or another when it comes to these two teams. Any pushback to the cult talk, the brainwashing talk, the one that I really want to discuss here, and this is outside of the SEC purview, and maybe we're going to do this a little tonight because Leeann also covers Houston, so I got to ask her about Monster Energy before we get her out of here, but. Dabo stepping down next year is the one that sticks out to me as something that I think is a little ludicrous, but at the same time, if anything out of those four statements could be true, is it that one?
Well, before I respond to that one, well, actually, I'll respond to that one first. No, I don't think it's ludicrous. I think, he's a Saban disciple in kind of a roundabout way. He didn't work for him, but they are buddies and kind of they're very good friends, family friends, vacation together. And he has the same mindset to a lot of sense, to a lot of, that's not the right word, but to a degree. There we go. With Saban. So yeah, if it gets too crazy, but the flip side is he brings in Tom Allen. Tom Allen says, hey, Dabo, I need 11 guys on the defense to kind of be somewhat competitive next season. And he does it. So, I think maybe, I know the national narrative doesn't want to hear it, but maybe he is kind of, being open to it, especially when he's given his DC a little bit of leeway and say what he needs, and they go out and get it. So, with that being said, that it could be, I think we're working on borrowed time at this point. He says he's not done. I don't think Clemson will ever get rid of him. There's no reason to. he's not. I mean, he's not done anything wrong. He graduates his players. I mean, everything that you want of an old school coach, he's doing.
Okay.
The flip side, my funny piece, and you can respond to that piece in a second, but I always love, my favorite part of these posts are it doesn't matter. Insert fan base here wasn't a take. I hope he enjoys that school up north or something like that. I always loved, oh yeah, we were full at D-line, so it wasn't a take. And we do it too. Clemson fans do it as well.
Everybody does it.
Everybody
that's the national line. That's right up there with we should do this one night, and we should do it one night soon because we're getting there, right? We need to rank the top 10 message board statements that you find on that we find on the boards. Day in and day out. You know what? Maybe that's a night. Maybe we need to grab MBG. Maybe we need to bring him in or or somebody.
He would be the man to do that. Yeah.
And I think that we should all just get in here together and do that. I think it will be fantastic.
Or he would help us with the list anyway. Sundays are a little tough for him, but yeah, he would help us with a list. I'm sure.
Well, he's always helpful, and we appreciate his friendship and kind of the back and forth between our shows for sure. All right, Casey. Any final thoughts for the South Carolina faithful?
I think you'll be all right, guys. Just hang in there. You're going to be okay.
Yeah, a flurry of we talked about it last week. A flurry of picks or flurry of commitments for Shane Beamer over the 4th of July,
including a 5-star.
Right, a little bit of momentum there, and I think they're just we're looking at the fringe here. We're looking at the fringe here when it comes to this little these boards that Craig teed up for us.
Well, I think too though that pipeline from Rock Hill goes directly to Columbia for the most part. So they pull a kid.
Yeah.
Now I know Darion Kendrick went and
sure.
And
you get one occasionally, right?
Potter got down there from South Point, but perennially that Rock Hill goes right to Columbia. 77 goes right on down through downtown Columbia. So it is a little bit of a coup, I guess, to get one of those kids from up there.
Yeah, sure.
I know.
But at the end of the day,
I don't even know his name.
Seth Tillman. At the end of the day, let's just make sure that we know this is all about Craig, making sure we don't mention that Clemson beat Georgia for recruit, because that's what happened. That's what happened. Just so everybody knows, that's where we're at. Okay. When we come back, I'll have Leeann Herring here from the Rebel Walk to talk about Ole Miss and what's going on. We talked about them a few weeks ago. We're going to dive back in. Trinidad Chambliss is Chris Lowe's #1 quarterback in the SEC. Oh. So we want to hear about it. How does that shake out? Casey, we appreciate you as always, my friend. Thank you for being here.
Leann's awesome, so enjoy her. Tell her I said hello.
We will do it. Absolutely. Have a great night. I'm Rob Williams, and we'll be right back here on SEC Sunday Night Live on the Chief Sports Network after this.
When playing sports, you want a coach that will fight for you. At Hewitt Diamaduros Law Firm, we've got your back. Whether it's personal injury, insurance disputes, negligence, or wrongful death, our team delivers exceptional legal services that makes meaningful difference in the lives of the individuals and families we work for. Visit hdlawsc.com. hdlawsc.com. Hewitt Diamaduros, we're on your team.
Oh man, the building is on fire.
Emergencies and accidents happen. When you're in the middle of a fire or water event, all you want is for things to return to normal as soon as possible. Resto Pros of the Midlands is with you, guiding you through the process and working with you to get your home or office back in working order. They'll answer your questions, discuss procedures, and can act as your advocate when it comes to processing your insurance claim. Resto Pros Midlands SC.com. Open 24/7 when you need them. Quality that is guaranteed.
At TriFit Physical Therapy and Performance, we believe true health and peak performance start with personalized care. Whether you're an athlete recovering from injury or just chasing your next personal best, we're here to guide your journey. With expert coaching, hands-on therapy, and transparent cash-based pricing, you get the care you need without the insurance red tape. One client drove 100 miles just to see us and said it was worth every mile. Contact us at trifitperformance.com or 803-353-5619. TriFit Physical Therapy and Performance, where recovery meets results.
Yo, what's up?
Baby, let's go.
This is SEC, Sunday night on the Chiefs Sports Network.
Welcome back to SEC Sunday Night Live on the Chief Sports Network, proudly presented by Hewitt Damaduros Law, HDLawSC.com. We have Leeann Herring here with us tonight from the Rebel Walk because we need to talk about Ole Miss. But first of all, tell us how you're doing, Leeann. Thanks a lot for being in here with us tonight.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be on the show. It's my first show of the season. Means we're getting that much closer to kickoff. Obviously, a lot of things going on in the SEC, big moving. Since it was up, of course, you know, my big thing is on the recruiting space. It's been a lot of June hustling and all this stuff. Some big things happening in the SEC. Of course, a lot of big recruiting. Even though July is this dead period, you and I both know, Rob, there's nothing dead about the dead period when it comes to SEC and football. Plenty of flips in the making. Some big recruitments, announcements definitely are coming down. So let's get to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a busy June for everybody. I'll tell you that we're having a little bit of a fun show tonight because I'm traveling this week. I'm doing an outdoor show. We're praying that my light doesn't die, so I'm not just talking to you in the dark for the rest of this half hour. You know, we're going to see how this thing plays out. If you hear some music in the background, I'm right here live on the Strip, and we got a lot going on in front of us, so it's going to be a fun night. But when you talk about recruiting, it's been action packed all through June, and you mentioned it's a dead period, but that just gives us more space to talk. And with SEC Media Days right around the corner, we know that talking season is kind of reaching its peak, and we're starting to look over to getting guys on the field. Things have not been calm in Oxford in the past several months, that's for sure. Can you talk a little bit about kind of how the city, the administration, the athletic department, and all the way down to the football coaching staff and players are turning the page from kind of what was the media firestorm of the Lane Kiffin fiasco last year? You kind of have a full offseason to hit the reset button, but I know that nationally there's still questions about Pete Golding coaching for a full season. What kind of has been the vibe in Oxford?
I think, like you said, the first couple of months going in, the weeks leading up to it before Lane Kiffin, I think we all kind of knew that stuff was brewing. There just seemed something that wasn't unsettled. A lot of talks, a lot of chirping. You know, I think in unlike a lot of things, you know, Rob, I noticed in this one, the players were a lot more vocal when Lane left and kind of opinionated. I think that kind of really turned the page a lot quicker than people thought. I think a lot of the salvaging that we were able to do was because the person that Pete Golding was, even though before he took the full reins, you know, he's always been a player guy. He's always been a real guy. The players believed in him. So I think the transition when Pete was officially named head coach really put a lot of ease to the guys because they've already seen what Pete can do. I think we were in some pretty tough recruiting battles too. You know, with Lane leaving, there was a big thing. Is he going to take players from us? Are we going to lose recruits? But Pete and that staff did a really good job, especially on that defensive staff, of retaining a lot of the coaches. And I think we salvaged a lot of things. But they were really quick to turn the page. I think the team overall, you know, it's a tough situation to be in. You know, especially, you know, where the program was and how much far, you know, what looked in front ahead of them. I mean, PFP playoffs, all these things, and then you feel like you're walked out on. But at the same time, I think the coaching staff and the players, you know, handled business really well, and they turned the page quickly and a chip on their shoulder. And I think with Pete Golding at the reins, he's taking the program down to be more real, more gritty, more blue collar. And I think that sometimes that's what's kind of stopped Ole Miss in the background, is not having that gritty mentality. They've always had talent, always been able to recruit, but it just seems like a lot of the pieces of puzzles never really connected. But I think Pete Golding this offseason, you know, has really done that with the team, and they're really buying in. I mean, when you talk to recruits, you know, Oxford used to be just a destination, you know, every now and again. But now, you know, Pete Golding, even though he hasn't been officially head coach for, you know, a full season, he's done a lot of the head coaching work. It's brought a lot of big recruits, a lot of, you know, and a lot of buy-in. And I think that there's a lot to be positive. I feel like the aftermath is for the better. And a lot of the people are happy with Pete Golding, even though he hasn't had a full season, because he got right to work. And, you know, he put his head down, and that team has just been working off season. I think they're going to come back a lot stronger, you know, from what little things we've seen in the off season and everything. But just the dynamics of that depth chart and the players that they're bringing back and what we got. But and the young talent. I mean, I can't say that enough about the young talent that's coming in here. Big game changers for what we're going to see.
Yeah, I think that obviously the two biggest pieces in Chambliss and Lacey that you have that are kind of the cornerstones, the foundation of what they're going to do this year. But I do want to start with recruiting because you mentioned that before and kind of the young talent that's coming in. As you know, in the recruiting space, when a coach is on the hot seat, in a lot of cases, and that's not the case with Golding, it's a little more nuanced. But when a coach is on the hot seat, there's a lot of negative recruiting that goes on against him from the teams that he's recruiting against. Have you guys seen or I guess I should say, what has been the type of negative recruiting that has been used against Ole Miss? Because in the recruiting space, there's always going to be a jab that's thrown from one direction or another. How has Pete Golding kind of fended that off? You talk about the positivity that he and his staff have brought in getting out there and getting it done on the recruiting trail. But part of that is not just going on offense, but it's putting your shield up and being on defense to what other programs are throwing at you. What have you seen on that?
I've always said about Ole Miss, especially with Golding at charge now and just how he recruited before when he was defensive coordinator and a lot of those coaches that stayed intact. They make big moves in silence. And I think that's been one of Pete Golding's biggest weapons that, when Sark made the comment about the basket weaving and of course, Lane talking about the race issue, that became very heated as well. I think, Pete was really good about addressing it, but not letting it take hold and bringing things back down to what Ole Miss is about, the development, the recruiting process. And when players go and they talk with him, when I talk to recruits, that have Ole Miss in their top programs or just looking at Ole Miss, that's the biggest thing they say about the coaches. Pete Golding, even though he's a defensive-minded coach, he's very heavily involved with the offensive recruitment too. There's not really a separation. And I think that's a big deal, for the recruits and their families, because the ones I talk to, they talk about the relationships. Randall Joyner is another name that comes up often, probably putting together one of the best defensive line classes in this 2027 haul. I mean, when you talk about Randall Joyner, what kind of developer he is on the field, a big thing that recruits also talk, just what kind of person and recruit he is. So I think that's been a big haul that Golding hasn't really put a lot of shade on what's out there in the media, and that's really trickled down to the guys. He addresses what he addresses and then he moves on. And I think he's just got his vault team focused on on taking care of business, doing by his actions, hanging your head down and being in silence. But the biggest thing I've heard from recruits is just, when they get down there, the relationships and how Golding is, and they just keep it real, and that's the biggest thing. And I know in a space of NIL age and all that, we talk about the bag, we talk about those things, and those definitely are big in the recruiting, and it factors in, and despite Ole Miss having NIL success, it is not the highest or deepest pockets in the SEC or in college football, but they make up for it in tremendous ways, because like I said, when you talk to players, when you talk to families, there's just something about Pete Golding, because he's real. He didn't change. He didn't try to make this dramatic mold to fit a head coach. He was who he was, and took ownership and accountability, called out who he needed to call out. But again, I think the biggest turn of the page is he just keeps his team focused, not to hear the outside noise, and just getting ready for what's ahead.
Yeah. So you talk about what's ahead. So we'll look at 2027. The class is strong, Leeann. As you look at it, they're 14th nationally. That's good enough for 7th in the SEC, according to On3. When you look at this group, I want to stay here for just a minute, and then we're going to turn our attention to what's actually going to be on the field for Ole Miss in 2026. Like we said, it's right around the corner. But when we look at recruiting and you kind of see what's coming down the pipe, I talk about this. I've been on the air for a couple hours now. I talked about it on another show just earlier tonight, where the momentum that happens in the summer then carries to the field, and then the field carries to the next recruiting class and flip season. Everything's so interconnected, and it moves in waves from one thing to the next, and you've got to ride the waves of momentum one to the next. What do you see? Let's skip over this year for the moment, as Pete Golding is kind of casting that vision, laying it out there, extremely close to a national championship berth last year. You got your core coming back this year, but after this year, Leeann, you're going to be really looking down the road, because your two stars I mentioned before in Trinidad Chambliss and Kejuan Lacey can't be your foundation anymore. What do you see in terms of a momentum with this 2027 class? And now we're starting to grab some 2028s as well.
I think the big key component here has been retention of their current depth chart. Like you said, we're not going to have all of that moving forward. But when recruits see that consistency, not a huge change in overall, it helps them buy in. And I think that's been a big, huge success for this 2027 class. Looking ahead to 2028, I think one of the biggest staples, obviously, we know we're going to lose Chambliss. We know Lacey's not going to be our guy in 2027, is going back into the rotation. I think one of the biggest assets that we had in being able to retain in this recruiting class has been, Keegan Croucher, our quarterback. And he is, the quarterback position, especially with the kind of talent he has. He's transferred from at the Baylor school now, of course, going to be having a strong cast of Ole Miss prospects, including, David Gabriel Georges, and all that type of stuff. I think him showing leadership in this 2027 class, if he wasn't going over anywhere, Kentucky, Ohio State, has really set the tone. And if you notice, we haven't really lost a lot of big targets in this 2027 class. And I think what Pete Golding's gone out and done has got a lot of diverse talent. He went out there, obviously, the big deal was to build in the trenches. Ole Miss has continued to do that. We knew that getting size and strength on that in the depth chart for the defensive line and the offensive line was going to be key. Because if you don't have those guys up front, it often gets forgotten. I feel like the linemen don't get a lot of love, but at the same time, that was one thing that Ole Miss was really, really lacking. You can have a star quarterback like Jackson Dart, like Trinidad Chambliss, like Keegan Croucher coming up, but if you don't have that front line protection, which we lacked a little bit, moving ahead, and Ole Miss went down and got that bit, and done a really good job. And some of these young guys, I mean, again, kudos to Randall Joyner on this defensive line ahead, keeping a lot of in-state top talent at home for this 2027 class. This wide receiver core. I'm going to have to talk a little bit about the most recent wide receiver committed, Alvin Mosley, out of Almeda Crawford here in Texas. Man, this is a kid that I've been watching. Probably one of the most underrated but lethal wide receivers. Completely flying under the radar. But when you put on this tape and you see him plays basketball, extremely athletic. I think he was one of the biggest grabs for this 2027 class as far as the wide receiver core. He's the highest rated wide receiver we have right now. But I think what's unique about this 2027 class is just all the playmakers that he went out. And a lot of them you'll notice that they're athletes. And they play multiple positions, especially the linemen. A lot of the linemen play two ways. And while we know they're going to be on one side of the ball more than likely, just Pete Golding going out there and recruiting not just a single package guy, but a guy that he can move across the line, or a player that, can play tight end or, double for something else, I think has been really key, because I think instead of specializing in one type of recruit, Pete Golding's gone out there and got some under the radar guys, some, top kids, but also has mixed that in with just pure athletic, and I think that's going to make a difference.
Okay, so you can kind of see the vision of where he wants to go, right? You have the athletic types that he can be versatile with, that he's going to move around. That kind of lends itself to what this offense can do in the future. But you also know a little bit about what this offense can do right now. Chris Lowe had Trinidad Chambliss ranked as his number one quarterback in the SEC heading into 2026. Obviously, the debate has been, I think, over the offseason between Ahmad Hardy and Kejuan Lacey, who's the better back in the SEC. Unfortunately, with Hardy's gunshot wound, that Lacey may have the upper hand going into the season, and just from a health standpoint. So let's take that and run with it from a headline standpoint, Leeann. The number one quarterback, number one running back in the SEC going into 2026. Where do you set the floor and the ceiling for this Ole Miss team? Craig and I went through in the spring and picked the entire SEC schedule. So every game for every team, we do this every year in the spring just to kind of have a fun exercise to say, how accurate can we be during spring practice? And it's been about 70% for both of us the past several years. Ole Miss has two of the most predictable stars on this roster, because you know what you're getting with those two. Is it enough, though, to get them back not only to the playoff, but further on, which would be the national championship?
It's always a tough call. I wish I had a crystal ball, because with spring ball, as comfortable as Kejuan Lacey and Trinidad Chambliss, we know what we're going to get with them. I think the biggest thing, obviously, that we can back them is the consistency. We know how they operate. We know how they're going to be. And we know there hasn't been a huge overhaul. Obviously, John David Baker taking over, coming back to Oxford, taking over, but he knows how to run this offense. It's not like we're learning a whole new offense, a whole new adaptation. So I really like this consistency here. People don't talk about it a lot, but there's a lot of teams that they're constantly changing, plays and schemes, coaching changes, and it changes the whole chemistry. And I always say it. There's something about the athleticism, what they have to produce, but the connection that Lacey and Chambliss have built over time is something that I think is just going to be special this year. But again, I don't always like to make full predictions until I see how they play in action. With spring ball these days, we don't get a lot from it. I mean, you're playing your squad, you're not going full pads, you're not going heavy. So for me, I always like to say, I like to wait till we play those first games. That way you kind of see, now, are we going to look like a college playoff team after that? We may or may not. Like again, because all the pieces got to gel. You got a lot of talent, you got a lot of star players, you got a lot of experience. But again, you got to get game day on the field and everything. The live energy, the live action always does change it. And I never like to compare the previous teams to the previous teams because you're never getting that one complete team. So, a team could be one way, the previous year and a completely different. I do think the Rebels have a chance to go far just because the mental state that they've been in, and I think where they're standing and what they're focusing on is a lot stronger than it has been in the past. I feel like there's a lot stronger connection, a lot stronger leadership. I think there's a lot of focus that's different. And as much as the physical talent is there, the mental aspect I think is really a big, turning point for this team. And I think, like I said, they have a chip on their shoulder. They have a point to prove, and I think it's really interesting. Last year's team was the team that wasn't supposed to make it that far. They were the team that was not the expensive roster. We didn't spend much money on them. They were the less talented team on paper. But then when it came time to push the shove and what they did out there, it translated on the field. And I think that's the biggest thing for this Ole Miss team. The talent's there. Now we just can see, is it going to translate on the field? It doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be, something out of a highlight reel every time. And I think that this team is on that way there.
Yeah, okay. So I agree with you. There's a lot there. You have your two pieces. You got to look at a lot of what's behind them, right? What's going on with this defense? It's Pete Golden's baby. Can he keep them? Can he keep them in check? And then how does the skill position outside of Lacey and at the wide receiver position, how do they form this attack around Trinidad Chambliss? You mentioned the schedule. It's hard to make predictions until we see them play on the field. They're going to have opportunities to prove it. That's for sure. It just, Texas and Georgia are probably the top two teams in terms of national attention. Georgia flies under the radar, but when I ask anybody about just overall talent and what they expect from consistency, I think that what you get with Kirby Smart, they're going to continue to go back there. Oklahoma is on this schedule, but Leeann, the game that I'm going to ask you about, because we have to talk about the atmosphere week 3 when LSU comes down, the first real test, a $50 million roster for the Tigers coming back. Will Lane Kiffin need to be in a special security detail? How is he going to be bubble wrapped? What's happening? We've seen this everywhere he has gone, right? When he goes back, it's not pretty. What is your expectation for what the vault's going to look like week 3, Tigers coming to town?
It's gonna be gloves off, bloodbath. It's gonna be something for the books. I mean, it really is. I think that that's gonna be one where if any game that they were really gonna go after it, they're gonna go after it and they're gonna prove a point, and and they're gonna stick it to them. It might not go the way that they want it to, but I guarantee you on that game they got it circled, and they're gonna make a point to prove on that one. So I think everyone's been talking and looking at that game. And I think that obviously they take one game at a time, but that team's got that game circled, and they're going to have it circled until it goes down. I think it's going to be a bloodbath, and it's going to be thirsty. It's going to be really interesting to see how it goes. And I think where it's going to start, obviously, it's going to be a different situation. I mean, as much as you don't want to deter from the game plan because it works, I think Pete Golding's going to have to come up with a unique kind of game plan because you got Lane Kiffin, that knows the ins and outs of that whole entire offense and that whole entire system. And when you know that, that's easy to break down. That's like the mentor-mentee kind of thing. It's a battle, and then with everything that you have in there. But I think this team's really, obviously Chambliss is going to gear this offense But I think that what's really going to hold here with this Ole Miss team is how they play this package. And I think that, as much as I love to see Trinidad Chambliss pass, I'm all about the run game with this team. I think that they've been most effective when they keep it on the ground. And I think that, with the weapons they have, with not just Lacey, but obviously wide receiver, tight end, I think that really is going to be key for this team. And I think that if they lean to that, it's always their strong foot. I say, you want to, it's like a slow burn. And I feel that's what the run game is. And Trinidad Chambliss just being, how he is. And you can't help but, see how well he knows how to move out of spaces and use his legs. And I mean, he's just like that. And I think that he's got a lot of weapons this year that are experienced and a lot of young guys that stepped up. But again, I think it's going to start. I think the biggest hesitation, the biggest difficulty is, can this offensive line stay intact? That's always been one of the thorns on the side for this Ole Miss offense is that line. They got a lot of experience coming back, but at the same time, even with that, they've had trouble. So I think that that's going to be one of the weaknesses that, Ole Miss is going to try to get past, not just with that LSU game, but just to make it down the hall. And the biggest thing, obviously, Rob, is staying healthy. With any SEC schedule, that's the biggest thing. You can have all the star talent, all the depth, but, when your guy goes down, it changes the game. It changes the mental game. And as much talent as this Ole Miss roster has, at the same time, you don't want to lose any of your key guys. And so I think the biggest obstacle for this team is to stay healthy. But I think as far as the offensive side of the ball is getting the trenches together and keeping that offensive line intact and not making, silly mistakes. Those are always the details. You got to pay attention to details. Some of the biggest things, with Ole Miss in past big games and big moments is, letting things get out of hand too fast. But I think Pete Golding really has changed the mentality and changed the pace of this team. So again, I would like to sit here and play how it goes, but it's going to be a tough schedule. It's not going to be a cakewalk, but I think on offensively, that's going to be key, is just really sticking to that run game more, using a lot of their weapons that they have. And that offensive line is going to have to stay, almost like a brick wall, day in and day out. But I think the biggest thing, obviously, is staying healthy to make that deep run.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to look at here. We've talked up one side and down the other when it comes to Ole Miss. I'll take a moment here as this last one for you, Leeann. We'll switch gears because you cover Houston as well, and I just need to know: is everybody energized about Monster Energy going on everything in the Big 12? Like Brett Yarmark came out and I think really thought that was going to land with some excitement, and the payoff. I don't know if the juice is worth the squeeze when putting Monster Energy on everything, and also, as you just look around, well, I'll just leave it there. Your thoughts on what's going on in the Big 12? How does that situation compare over to what you're seeing with the Rebels, and just from a conference standpoint with the SEC in terms of the financial aspect?
Yeah, so it's going to be really interesting to see Monster over everything because, I mean, we're talking about, this is not, guys, they're going to be the entitlement sponsor. So you're going to see it left and right, not just in Houston, every Big 12 stadium, from patches to the fields and everything. I mean, it might as well be NASCAR come football. I think I think that there's an appreciativeness, obviously, because we know in comparison, the Big 12, as far as the contract, take Texas Tech out, obviously, because they're in a land of their own when it comes to NIL and all sorts of deals. But, I think it's trying to make the conference, somewhat balanced. But like you said, when you really look at the revenue for Houston, for example, when you look at the revenue from the Monster deal, it's about $1 million, So, I mean, that really covers just one of their star players. If you look at Kai Henderson, what his NIL value was, and that's one 5-star player. So, how do you make that stretch? So like you said, is it really worth it? We shall see. But I think too, a big deal is you're trying to keep up with the Joneses and you're trying to keep up with the SEC. You can say the comparison and everything. I've spent my last 15 seasons in the SEC between Ole Miss and Kentucky. So I never thought I'd be in Houston. I never thought I'd be in the Big 12, and it's a difference. I mean, I tell the story when I went to Houston, it was so different than being at Ole Miss and the SEC. But it's a different appreciation because now you're looking at a conference that's trying to compete. Houston, definitely, there is so much talent in Houston, and a lot of these teams are picking up on it. A lot of SEC teams are picking up. So they're going to Houston and posting these kids, and how do you compete? So Willie Fritz has done a great job at Houston trying to, use his old school tradition, his relationships, building his backyard with high school players. But Rob, as much as we don't want to say it's all about the money, and you have to have an NIL to compete. Coach Kelvin Sampson, basketball coach at Houston's been a big proponent. Like, we got talent, we have best coaches, but to compete to win national championships, you need money. You need NIL money. Like that's, and so I think too, the move to do that Monster Energy deal was a way to try to start keeping up. We'll see how it goes. I mean, it's gonna be interesting. I don't know. I mean, like I said, I think there's an appreciation for it, but like you said, is it really going at the end of the day, collectively for the conference, it will be a big step because I think it gives a major brand towards the Big 12, but at the same time, for each individual team, is it really going to help when you look at all the costs it takes to compete in the NIL? Even if your team's winning, I mean, we're talking about a Houston team in particular that Willie Fritz took from a losing, no value team to a 10-win season, beating an LSU, but still, even in that, if that happens in the SEC, you got people coming in left and right wanting to build on a winner. At a place like Houston, other Big 12 schools, it's not so. So I think that there's that Monster Energy deal is trying to bring more confidence. The Big 12 can compete and there's a lot of talent. So it'll be interesting to see all that monster stuff. But again, like you said, I don't know individually for the team how much it's really worth it.
If it's a first step for Yormark, then I think then it makes sense. If there's something else coming behind this, you mentioned Kelvin Sampson, obviously Monster logo going on the basketball court as well. So that $1 million may in Houston, who knows how it's going to get allocated? Does it go to Kelvin Sampson to be a part of a package for one player? Because in basketball, if you're going to get the top guys, $1 million isn't going to get it done. So we'll see how that plays out. Leanne, thanks so much for being here with us to talk about the Rebels tonight. We really appreciate it. Good luck to you all season. I know you're going to be all over the place, and we will make sure we get people pointed in your direction so they can follow along. We love the Rebel Walk. Tell Miss Evie we said hello, and we'll talk to y'all soon.
All right. Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
All right, this has been SEC Sunday Night. Shout out to Leeann Herring there from the Rebel Walk, and also to Casey Cregan, the award-winning, sultry tones tickling our ears. More than a feeling driving by me on the street right now, blasting out of the speakers. It's been a fun night. I'm Rob Williams, and this is SEC Sunday Night on the Chief Sports Network. We'll see you next time.